Are there any Pokemon that are stronger before they've evolved?
So, it kind of depends on your definition of strong. If we're talking about stats, there's only one answer. It's Nincada. Nincada has a higher stat total than Shedinja when it evolves, because Shedinja's HP stat drops all the way down to 1, which means that Nincada overall has a higher base stat total. But that's too simple and that's too easy. However, there are some Pokemon that are better competitively and better to use in battle when they haven't evolved as opposed to when they have. Most Pokemon, they evolve, they get better stats across the board, and they're just better to use. However, some Pokemon got given evolutions after the generation that they were introduced in. So for example, Chansey was introduced in Generation 1 as a single stage Pokemon and therefore had some pretty good stats. Anyway, then it was given an evolution to be able to become Blissey. Now, Blissey has a slight increase in stats, but there is an item called the eviolite, which means that if a Pokemon could still evolve a further stage, it gets a massive boost to both its defensive stats. Now, Chansey and Blissey both being defensive Pokemon, Chansey is better to use because it gets a way bigger defensive boost than it would have from evolving into a Blissey. Dusclops is another example. Dusclops was invented in Generation 3 and was the final stage of the Duskull line until, in a future generation, they made Dusk Noir. Now, Dusk Noir does get some stat boosts from evolving, but if it was to have it at the same rate, that would be a massively overpowered Pokemon. However, Dusclops can now hold the Eviolite item and get massive defensive boosts, making it ridiculously hard to take down. But my favorite Pokemon to use the Eviolite with is actually not a naturally defensive Pokemon. It's Scyther. Scyther can evolve. Now, Scyther has a unique situation that when it evolves, its base stat total doesn't increase. Scizor, Scyther, and Cleavor all have the same base stat total. However, Scyther evolves into the other two, and therefore can hold the Eviolite item. Scyther now has this incredible speed stat, a very, very respectable attacking stat as well, and boosted defenses. Scyther just becomes better when it doesn't evolve and you give it the Eviolite.